Welcome back everyone. Today I'll be prepping Catastrofe for 3D printing. This is gonna be a very complex process. I decided to try a different approach. As you saw last video, I rigged Catastrofe so I could pose her, and that could work. And it was a good attempt. I didn't actually like the results that much. And I also think that having the ability to just pose her yourself is a little bit better. So I'm gonna try and make her articulated. So I go back into Blender and get my original model. I quickly go through every iteration of the models that I have because I've made different versions. I don't actually know what approach to take. I'm deciding to go for the articulated approach, which is why it's very helpful for me to have just taken different versions and save them for later on. So my main idea to do this is that, well, obviously Catastrofe is going to have different parts that are going to fit with each other. So for that, I need to actually take my model and start cutting it into little pieces. Here I'm trying to select the entirety of the head, which actually makes me realize that there's a lot of meshes and a lot of dead spaces that I'm gonna have to fill in, which, well, I don't know. It's making me doubt whether or not this is a good idea, but I'm gonna keep trying anyways, see if it's a good approach, and I'll keep doing that. So I finally selected the interior of the head and I separated it. I wanted to see if there are other models that I could use, so I found that I had kept a copy of the original model before all these spheres were joined together, which could be useful. I mean, I'm looking really into that because, yeah, this was a very intensive process. Well, I mean, I'm gonna try to see if cutting the original model is gonna be good for me in the long run, so I'm gonna try to stick to that now. This is very important. I'm making my proper copies, and I made a new folder on the right side. This folder allows me to organize myself, so I don't actually pick up meshes that pretty much look the same. This folder helps me organize my mesh better, so I named it Articulated Catastrofe. Here's where I'm gonna put everything that I'm gonna be cutting out of Catastrofe, and it's gonna help me not get stuck on it. Here I am selecting the arms. What I need to cut out of Catastrofe is the head, the arms. I need to cut her body into two so she can rotate her torso from the pelvis, get the knees, and obviously the tail. Just do the same process I already did when rigging it. I know it's weird to just go back and do this. I mean, I think this approach is also a good idea. It could save me a lot of time in the long run because I can avoid thinking of a lot of poses and getting stuck on that. I'm a little dry creatively. But yeah, what I need to do now is, since I'm gonna articulate her and I want her to see it and move, I want her dress and all of the other soft parts like the cape to just not be part of the model, and that is because I want Catastrofe to be able to see it and move freely. What's really gonna stop her to do that is gonna be the cloak and the skirt. Obviously what I could do is try to print it in ABS, but I don't actually have that filament. I have very sturdy filament. I didn't have the money to buy another one, so I'm thinking of doing two things. I could either use cloth to just make her clothing and make it dynamic, make it easy, or I could try another approach, which is using the NASA fabric. You know, I actually found a model and I will try to do the printing for that, see if I can make it small enough so it works and it looks fine. But yeah, now we're looking at Catastrofe divided by parts. As you see, there are a lot of missing holes that were made by joining the geometries, so I'm gonna try and clean that mesh. I begin by cleaning the tail, which turns out has a lot of vertices that don't make sense, but I clean it, I adjust it, and then I have to go to the legs and I clean it a little so that I can extrude it naturally to the top and it doesn't mess with anything. What I'm doing now is trying to fix the feet because my girlfriend told me that my feet look ugly and didn't look like a cat, so I'm gonna give it that little flair so it looks a little better so that I can actually give it to her. She's gonna like it. And yeah, maybe the toes were a little bit poorly done. So yeah, just push and pull vertices, smooth some of this stuff out and work on it for a while. I don't really think I need to really do that many details, but I go for it anyways because I'm a very detail-oriented person, so I want it to look as good as possible and, you know, just feed my OCD as much as I can. I'm getting nervous, man. I took a lot of time just doing this stuff. Yeah, I didn't actually expect for this sculpting to take this much time. It is very lengthy of a process. I mean, yeah, it's... man, I'm very thorough. Yep, I should have done that. But yeah, I think I'm finally done. So I go to the body, and what I need to do is to extrude the geometry that goes directly to the bottom. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that I cut out, so I have to refill it. And I go to a ribbon, and it has a lot of geometry, so I have to keep pushing and pulling the vertices until they look correct, which is very, very tedious. As you can remember from last video, there's a lot of details that I need to fix before I can do this. And yeah, it is very complicated to get it done, because I add a lot of geometry that I'm not going to be using. The point of modeling Catastra, the way I modeled her, was to just speed things up, and I realized that I wasn't doing that. So yeah, I'm gonna take it back. I'm gonna go to the model that I was enjoying before. I'm gonna duplicate it, and I'm gonna do some quick adjusting on the feet, just like I already done, because of course these feet hadn't been adjusted before. So I'm playing with that a little bit, so it looks better. Yeah, it's just very basic shaping and modeling, so the feet look like I got them to do in the other model. Here it's very simple. I just go to the cloak, I delete it, I grab the skirt and some other extra parts are gonna be moving, and just take them out. And since my mesh here it's cleaner, I can actually join the vertices and adjust better. Well, now I'm just adjusting some vertices, but I filled it in very quickly. I fixed some like extra faces that I added because I was a little bit careless. But yeah, I mean, she's separated into different pieces. She looks good to work with, and my next step is gonna be to, out of this model, separate the parts that I need to be together. And I got the fingers, the feet. I go back to toes and shape them a little bit more because I'm getting controlled by the OCD, so yeah, I have to do a whole lot more than that. I want the models to be separate from the body, and I'm just gonna begin cutting everything. So before I move on to that, I actually wanted to test the NASA mesh, which was something that I wanted to test out. I looked at a lot of videos of the NASA fabric, and it looks very interesting. I didn't know it was going to be this complex, so I'm going to try and ship out the mesh so I can do a little bit of fabric that I can test, making sure the meshes don't overlap when they print together, and I'm going to be doing that for a little while. So now my arrangement of octagons is down to a level that I'm actually satisfied with, and yeah, I'm going to just export it as an steel and get it right into my slicer. So yeah, I'll be seeing you on the real live cam now. So what I did was that I actually I printed this. So this was my test, and as you can see, it's actually very broken. Yeah, it's not good. I mean, I did break it when I tried to actually move it. It's very flimsy, it's very small. I'm planning on Catastra to be like 10 centimeters tall. So yeah, this is not gonna work out for me. So maybe we should go to the simpler step and just make it cloth. So yeah, here we are back with Catastra. My test didn't work out that well, so I think I'm just gonna have to commit, go back to the model, and just focus primarily on joining the faces that I need. I'm getting now every single part that I need cut out, and what I need to do is to get those individual pieces to be just one. So I'm just gonna join them very quickly, and also gonna arrange my mesh. This part is gonna be very quick. I'm just gonna use the Boolean process again. I'm gonna try to join everything that I can as fast as possible, and do it faster than last video. I get rid of my futile attempt that I did before because, well, it's kind of useless, taking a lot of space, and I'm really not gonna use it. So yeah, I'm just gonna get rid of it. I'm taking a lot of advantage of the mirror modifier because, as you can see, there's a lot of pieces, but most of what I actually modeled has been mirrored. So if I can just join them with the Boolean before applying the mirror modifier, it's gonna save me half the time, and it's gonna be great because I can also just shape out everything. For example, now I'm at the fingers, and I'm gonna be joining them one by one, which is gonna be very easy. Put the Boolean to each other, erase the extra geometry, join everything together, and go for the feet, and repeat the same process. Now that my meshes have been joined together, I go to the sculpt tools and smooth it out a little bit. You know, it already has the shape that I need, but I just don't want it to look messy. I'm just gonna smooth it out in the fingers of the paws. I'm gonna go specifically to the arms, and my idea is for Catastra to just move her arms diagonally. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have her just rotate her arms in a T-pose. So I'm gonna grab the geometry that I can. Fortunately for me, I use the Din Topo option, which adds a little more geometry. It makes it very hard to just select rows of mesh. I have to do it manually, but it doesn't take that much time. And yeah, here I'm gonna try to warp the mesh so her arms bend naturally. This is one of those disadvantages of me not being really decisive on what I actually want to make, because the arms look a little big now and I still have to shape them out a lot. So I'm gonna be reshaping it a little bit too much until it looks decent enough. But yeah, if I had decided on just doing this step first, it would have been easier. I didn't do that because I want to see how this works. I've actually never printed anything, and I'm actually afraid of doing articulated things because they may break, they may not work, and it's a very difficult process, you know. Actually committing to making the cloth for the dress and the cloak is a little bit too much because, well, it's just easier to think that the 3D printer will do all the work, but at least it's gonna have more of a handmade feel, you know, which is nice. I'm gonna go here to just adjust the mesh and getting the legs to fit with the pelvis. I'm gonna do some extra adjustments to the arm, and I'm making them a little smaller so they don't look that big, and I'm gonna begin doing the cutouts and going to go go for the testing phase. Like I said, Katasara needs to be about 10 centimeters tall. I don't think that's too big. I don't want her to be like huge. You know, I want it to be part of a shelf and be usable, be postable, be like a small collectible that's half a toy. And so I think 10 centimeters is actually a good measurement for her. So I get a cube, and this is one process that I do a lot, which is when I need to model something to a certain size, I just get a cube and I resize it to, in this case, 10 centimeters, and I just try to fit Katasara inside the cube. This I call the measurement cube. What I do for this is I just take the cube, I delete only the faces, so I get the edges to have the frame in which Katasara can be sized. It's not really important to do this right now. It's useful for me when I'm modeling characters, because if I have a human-based model and I want them to be of a certain height, I can have this box around them, so that when I'm modeling and sculpting, I can be as accurate as I can and keep them inside the shape as much as possible. But yeah, it's just a little bit of a process that I usually do. So the next thing that I need now is to work on the joints. I found this image on Pinterest with the different kind of joints that you can use for action figures. You have the ball joint, the pivot joint, the hinge joint, and the T-crunch. So as you can see in the model, you see that the ball joints, you can move it to the sides, let's say on the X-axis and the Y-axis. The pivot joint just rotates on one axis. The hinge joint does the same thing as pivot joint, but for the other axis. You know, for bendable parts, rotating parts. What I want to focus on now is getting the pivot joints so that I can focus on rotating the head, the torso, maybe the hands and feet, and the hinge joint to bend the arms, the legs, and the tail. I'm gonna be adding those right now. So I begin by adding a circle and just extruding it inwards. With this I can just make the space in which the pivot joint can enter and get stuck, and I just begin shaping it out very roughly. I don't think it needs to be that deep of a space for it to enter and get stuck on. It just needs to be small enough to be flexible. So once my model is done, I take this pointless cone, I guess you could call it, and just duplicate it to the inside so that I can use it and make the measurement. I do the two parts of the joint, make a copy so that I can retweak it later, and I begin adding it to Katasara. So as you can see, the size of this joint is actually different because, well, the parts of the body are different. So what I want to do now is to make sure that I can make them fit into each other so that when I push the joints with one another, they fit in and they don't fall apart as easily. So I open the edge length options so that I can make sure I take two random points that I think will work, and I make this line, which I'm going to be measuring with. So I select the part of the joint that's going to be inserting itself. I adjust my view, and as I scale down, I get a precise measurement of what the space would approximately be like. So for this, I decided to stop at 0.3 millimeters, which should be a good enough space for it to enter and move without causing too much friction. It's a little bit small, but it should work fine. You know, the 3D printer works around 0.2 millimeters, which is actually nice. It's a good enough space for me. Once I'm sure that this is the space that I want and that I need, I just scale down to where I think it's gonna make it better. So just scale down to make sure that these joints can fit with each other. After adjusting, I decided to work very smartly and use a mirror modifier. But I actually messed up because I moved the origin point a little bit too much and I have to readjust so the joints are distributed equally. But now that they've properly handled, I can just duplicate the joints, use them for the legs, and duplicate it again to make a bigger one. Then I'm going to be using for the head and for the torso. As I said before, this mirroring process was damaged by me not being careful enough to do it proper. So there's going to be a lot of fixes and tweakings. But yeah, I think this mesh works. I duplicate it and I copied it in the back so that I can move the torso and the head. And yeah, that should be good enough for me. Now what I want to work on is the hinge joint. So I'm going to take the circles. I'm going to adjust more of the mesh so it works better, to align everything as best as possible with what I did, which, I mean, I'm going to battle with that a lot. So we should better just keep this. So now the circles have been extruded to make this little wheel. And what I want to do is to connect these wheels, get the space so that the joint can enter each of these sides of the wheel. I duplicate it again like I did with the other joint. I measure again so it works as best as it possibly can. This time I go for 0.1 millimeters because I think this should be as tight as possible, but we're going to have to see whether or not that works. So I join these parts of the middle, extrude these joint to the sides, and with that it should be properly done. So what I decide to do now is just locate every single one of these joints to where they would work. And this is a lot about trial and error. To me, it's hard to actually visualize how this is going to be working in movement because I haven't done this before. And yeah, I'm thinking that I wouldn't like the tail to just move in the same place and just curl up. So I duplicate another joint. At this point I don't actually bother that much with just making sure it works as best I can, which is why I just scale it down and just put it there. But theoretically it will allow me to spin the tail and bend it in directions that would be nice for poses. So I want these hinge joints to be part of the arms and the legs, so I duplicate them and pretty much make them so that I can use them for the arms. I just arrange them for the arms and arrange them for the legs. I give it a look at the skeleton that's gonna be moving Catastra, and yeah, I think that I could actually use the hinge joints to move the hands, but I also noticed that my hinge joints were actually modeled incorrectly. As you can see, the hinge that inserts itself to the other two wheels, as I called them before, they're going to the same side, so there's gonna be no movement, so I'm gonna have to adjust that on every single one of the hinges that I made. So yeah, another adjustment didn't made because I'm still new to this, so please bear with me. So yeah, I go back to the tail, the arms, and the legs to adjust everything, make sure they work as best they can. I think all the joints look nice, so I think I could actually use the pivot joint on the hands so they move and you could pose with the staff and the book later on. I don't think I actually need to use the pivot joint for the feet because I don't think I actually need to move it. I think it's gonna be a little extra that really doesn't add much to the character. But yeah, I'm ready to print, and before printing I actually decide to do the smart thing and just print these pivots before actually committing to using a lot of filament for Catastra. So yeah, I duplicate all the joints that I decided to make in all the sizes that I made to make sure that once I print them they work. The idea here is to just get them directly into my slicer, test them out, and see whether or not they work properly. I just did some adjustments beforehand so that they can be located at the base of the print bed and they don't have any problems. And we're gonna jump right into the printing. This is what I printed. So I put a lot of small pieces. As you can see, these joints are actually way too small. But yeah, so these are my joints that I printed. So this is the biggest one. As you can see, it has some extra mesh that I didn't want it to have. But I'm gonna see whether or not this works this way or not. Let's just push it and see if it actually fits in. I don't think it's gonna fit. So yeah, that's one of the problems that I have because, oh my god, it's not gonna get in. So it's a good idea that I tested this because it's not gonna work. I don't know how I'm gonna get it in. So you can see here, this part is actually bigger than this, so it's not gonna get in. It's bigger by quite a lot more than I thought it would be. So I need to go back and rework my joints, which I don't really want to do. Let me try to push it down. And just, well, it's exploding. It's not broken, so it's fine. It should be fine. After printing, I realized that I needed to just give something to these joints because these are the hinge joints and they're not connected by anything. But I mean, I can still test it out, but they're way too small. They're not gonna insert themselves into anything right now. Like 100%. Honestly, they're not gonna get into anything. Oh my god, it's gonna be a mess. I 100% don't know what I'm gonna do now. I haven't actually tried the small ones. Let me try and see if these work. This is the medium-sized pivot joint. Same problem, I think. Yeah, it's not getting any. It's not getting. Oh, I think I should just get stuck. So maybe I could do this. Maybe it's just too thick for the other one. Okay, so I just broke it. Yeah, bad idea. Bad idea. Could try the other one, but nothing assures me that's gonna work. So yeah, sorry, I'm taking it too far from the camera. Yeah, no, it's not gonna work. Tolerances are really not my thing. So yeah, that's gonna be bad for everything that I'm planning.